Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 520, and today's date is November 17th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Islamic State Provokes Obama to Send in U.S. Ground Forces. Now, we all understand that Obama has told us that there's going to be no boots on the ground, but we're seeing evidence completely the opposite of what he's saying. And every time I hear him say this, I think, yes, that means there are going to be boots on the ground. And we see, as time has gone on, these advisors, they sent in 200, then 475, then 600, now 1,500, and we can see it's totally mission creep. And as time goes on, we're going to see more and more of this happen, because what we understand is that they've taken over an airbase in Iraq. They're setting up a division headquarters. We also understand that the Islamic State was created by the United States, UK, Israel, and other Arab nations. They were there, they were trained, they're put into force to get Assad out. That is it. They also understood that all around the Middle East, they were losing control. I mean, we see Yemen, we see Libya, we see Iraq, we see Lebanon. People are rising up in these countries. They want their countries back, and we see that right now. Yemen and Libya, they've pretty much have fallen, and the puppet governments are being thrown out right now. We see embassies being evacuated. We're seeing travel advisories being blasted by the U.S. government saying do not go to these areas, because they understand they're definitely going to need to go back into these countries. And what we're seeing now is the Islamic State is saying, yes, we're going to expand our caliphate. We're going to go into all those countries where the United States government lost control, because this is where they need to get back into. And they can't explain to the American people saying, listen, we removed the governments there, we gave them democracy, and they didn't like it, so we have to go back in. It would make no sense whatsoever. But with a terrorist group in there, they can say, the terrorist group is inside this country, they're trying to create a caliphate, this is why we need to go in there, and this is why we have the Islamic State. We also understand that the Islamic State was controlled and trained in Jordan. They were preparing to use them in Syria with the Free Syrian Army. But what happened was there was elections, and they saw that Assad was re-elected. So they said, okay, listen, the Free Syrian Army has been battling Assad. They are completely losing. They are being destroyed. They're being pushed out of Syria. What do we need to do? Let's take this new force, bring them down into Iraq. Let's cause chaos and make everyone think we have this terrorist group that is now going from Iraq all the way to Syria. And we can see this is exactly what is going on at this point. Now, they're going to use this to get into Syria, and we know this. We see already they're changing their strategy. They're getting ready to push forward and go into Syria. They're going to be doing this, and the propaganda is going to be running wild. Already we see the Islamic State provoking Obama, saying, listen, bring in the ground troops. Come on, try to get us. And we can see already that this is exactly what they want, because there's no way the American people are going to say, let's bring our ground troops into Syria and Iraq and let's start another war. So again, what do they have to do? How do they have to convince us? They have to make this Islamic State look like it's the most deadly terrorist organization out there, and this is exactly what they're doing. They're pushing the propaganda as hard as they possibly can. They're setting us up for a false flag event to convince us that the Islamic State has attacked the United States, has attacked UK, and other European nations. And this way the coalition can say, okay, now it's time. They'll even get the UN involved in this, and they'll go in and they'll invade Iraq and then eventually move into Syria. And this is the plan. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Europe is completely falling apart. Most of the countries are in a deep depression. Some others are in a recession/depression, and other countries are heading towards a recession. We understand they're full of debt. They're implementing austerity, and the youth of these countries, non-existent. They do not have work. The unemployment is so high, they're not contributing whatsoever. There's no revenue being produced by them. They're not saving money. They're not getting good jobs. So the next generation for these countries is completely falling apart. Now, the same thing's happening here in the United States. The only difference is the Fed, the government, they pretty much give us illusionary based numbers, GDP, unemployment, inflation. They pretend that everything is fine. They want us looking at the stock market. They want us looking at the gold and showing us, look, it's continually losing value. It's continually being pushed down. So there is nothing wrong here. Look at the stock market. Look at the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ. Everything's being pushed up. Everything is fine. And of course, the stock market is the last indicator that the economy is falling apart. What we're doing is we're looking at real economic indicators. We're looking at retail. We're looking at real estate. We're looking at manufacturing. We're looking at what is really going on with the job market, and we're looking at this every single day, and we realize it's getting worse and worse as time goes on. Even though the government and the Fed are telling us that everything is better, we're in a recovery, this is part of their illusion to convince everyone that everything is fine, because when they have the Islamic State hit the United States with Russia or China cyber attacking the power grid, the financial institutions, they can make the case that, look, the Islamic State, along with the other nations, brought our economy to its knees, and we were improving it. We were in a recovery. Everything was fine. And now we need to go to war. And of course, they want this to happen because they want the American people to get really angry, pissed off, and beg for war. Now we see the Empire Fed manufacturing miss second month in a row, and we could see a small bounce was about 10.16 against expectations of about 12.2. This is the second miss in a row. Now, industrial production has dropped. Auto manufacturing is slumped third month in a row. And what we're seeing is mining is down negative 0.9%, biggest drop in a year. Utilities down negative 0.7%, led by a 3.2% plunge in natural gas. And the most of all, motor vehicle manufacturing down negative 1.2%. U.S. industrial production slid about 0.1% in October, notably missing expectations of a rise of 0.2%, so they're completely off. This is the third monthly drop in motor vehicles and parts production, the worst consecutive run since January of 2009. Now, of course, the economists are out there and they're saying, we might have to revise our GDP for the fourth quarter. We're going to bring it down to about 2.7, but these numbers really don't make sense anymore. They're really not of value because we know the government just manipulates it any way they want. Now, we remember the government went all the way back to 1929, put in research and development, and recalculated GDP from 1929 all the way to the present so they can keep GDP in the green. And we also have to remember that first part of 2014 where GDP was down by like negative 2%, and all of a sudden it made this incredible comeback to a positive like 3% or something like that in that range, and it was like an increase of like 6%, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And we understand the unemployment numbers are completely made up because as they keep telling us that unemployment is coming down, we see real estate getting worse, we see retail getting worse with stores closing, with more layoffs, and we're continually seeing this, and it is non-stop. Now, China right now is ready to open up their stock exchange. The Shanghai and Hong Kong stock exchanges are now linked, giving foreign investors access to the tightly controlled Chinese capital markets. Stocks on both markets can be traded freely now. Opening its markets is one of the major economic reforms China has undertaken to allow its currency to free float within the next 4 years. Now, China has also signed the deal with Australia. China and Australia have sealed a major free trade agreement worth billions, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago. The Australian agricultural sector, tariff-free access to the massive Chinese market, while China will get greater access to investment projects in Australia. Ministers from China and Australia signed a declaration of intent on Monday, culminating over a decade of work towards the deal. The actual agreement will not take effect until 2015, when all the legal points have been drafted and translated. The big winner from the deal is the Australian agricultural sector, particularly dairy farmers and winemakers, who will have tax and tariff-free access to the Chinese markets. About 85% of Australian exports to China will not incur tariffs, with this figure rising to about 95% when the deal is fully implemented. So we can see right now, China is continually making deals all around the world. They have not stopped. They are building the brick nation system. And we can see right now the United States government central bankers do not want this to go live whatsoever. They know it's going to be a problem, but they're continually pushing on, and this will go live in 2015. Now, David Cameron is out there, and he is giving us a huge warning. And he said the global economy risked another crash, and said in an article that red warning lights were flashing on the dashboard of the global economy, and the Eurozone was teetering on the brink of another recession. Really? He just figured this one out. We've been talking about this for a very long time right now. Even Christine Lagarde is out there, and she's the managing director of the IMF, has also expressed fears that a diet of high debt, low growth, and unemployment may yet become the new normal in Europe. Yeah, it's called a collapse. The entire system is collapsing. The debt cannot be sustained. People cannot find jobs. If people don't have jobs, they can't produce revenue to pay for the debt. This is a continuing cycle. It cannot be stopped at this point. The 20 richest countries in the world pledged to magic up 2.1% of economic growth over the next 5 years. How this is suddenly possible after 6 years of failure is really unclear, but it makes for good PR. And of course, they continually tell us that, oh, don't worry, 2014, France, Spain, Cyprus, Greece, they're all going to be doing much, much better. We see GDP like 1-2%. The United States says the same thing. Oh, unemployment's going to come way down. Of course, they manipulate their numbers to make it look really, really good. There's going to be no inflation, but when you go to the market, what do you see? You see inflation on milk, meat, fresh produce, liquor. I mean, things are just skyrocketing, and we can see right now all of what they're saying is completely fake. They're trying to convince you that everything's going to be all right, and they keep pushing it off. Yes, it's going to be all right next year, but how can it be? All of a sudden, things are just going to turn around out of nowhere. How is it when all these people are unemployed and they keep getting more and more debt? How is this possibly going to get any better? It can't. But they don't want to admit it. Instead, what are they doing? They're provoking war all over the globe right now. They got to get World War III started to cover this entire economic collapse, and they know it. And this is why you see the provoking going on all over the place. In the meantime, what are they trying to do? Well, they're continually trying to get rid of our rights here in the United States. Now, what's very interesting, and as you know, and I've said this many times with Common Core is to dumb down the people of the United States. It only takes one generation to do this, and they know this. They're also trying to brainwash the next generation that, hey, listen, you don't have rights. They are privileges. The government gave you these privileges, and we can take them away. And I placed this on Sentinel Alerts. This was on Sunday, and you can see from what they're teaching elementary children, and I'll read it to you. It says that when you are a citizen, you have rights. Rights are special privileges the government gives you. Well, that's really false. The government doesn't give you anything. You are born with these rights, and they cannot be taken away. In our country, you have free speech. You also given the right to choose a religion. In America, the press is free to tell you what is happening in the world. The Bill of Rights lists the freedoms given to the citizens, given to the people. But they seem to change all of these things because what they're trying to do is they're trying to convince everyone that you do not have these rights. And if the government sees it necessary to take it away, they can if they like to. But again, we have to remember, and we have to continually teach our children that you are born with these rights. You need to stick up for these rights. These are the rights the Founding Fathers put together to protect us from government. And we can see what the government is trying to do. They're using everything they possibly can to convince us that we don't have this. And if you look around the country, you see it in colleges now where there's many videos out there where they have the people trying to hand out brochures or things like that, and the administrators come and tell them to go into a fenced-in area because this is the free speech area. And of course, those people give them an argument saying, everywhere is a free speech area. We do not have to go in this area. And they try to convince them that it's in their best interest. It's for your safety. And they always do this. They always turn it around that it's for your safety. The same thing happened with Clive and Bundy, or in Washington They set up these free speech areas, these little caged-in, fenced-in areas where they want you to go and speak freely. And we can tell from all of this that they're trying to convince everyone. And this is why they continually do this, because they want to convince you that this is where you need to go. No one should ever go into these areas. This is not where we have free speech. We have free speech anywhere we want. Now, it looks like Gallup has come out with a survey and some results here. Americans have been acquiring guns at record levels. Gallup recently reported that 63% of Americans now believe that having a gun at home makes them safer. This number nearly doubled the percentage reporting that same belief 14 years ago. So basically it has doubled, and all this entire movement to get rid of the Second Amendment and get rid of the guns, to tell everyone that you don't need them, is actually backfiring. What's happening is people are looking at the conditions of what's going on around the world, and they're looking at everything saying, you know something, I'd feel a little bit safer with something in my house. And we can see from this Gallup report that yes, more and more and more Americans are saying, you know something, maybe we should have a weapon just in case. Not to carry around, but in our home for safety, just in case something does occur. Now, Obama was out in Ferguson, and he said something very, very strange. Now, we understand the court ruling is going to come down if they're going to indict the police officer, and pretty much all the evidence right now looks like they're not going to indict him, and this is going to have problems with the people inside Ferguson, and we're going to have to watch this very carefully. But Obama was in Ferguson, and he met with the leaders of the protest group on November 5th. After the midterm elections, and the meeting was not on his daily schedule. He was concerned that the protesters need to stay on course. Now, what is he talking about? Why did he say this? Why do the protesters have to stay on course? It makes no sense why he's out there saying this, but very interestingly, today, the Missouri Governor Jay Nixon declared a state of emergency and activated the National Guard Monday afternoon ahead of a grand jury decision. Citing the possibility of expanded unrest, the executive order grants Missouri Highway Patrol, St. Louis County Police, and St. Louis Metropolitan Police the power to operate as a unified command to protect civil rights and ensure public safety in the city of Ferguson and the St. Louis region. So, was Obama out there saying, listen, you keep protesting, we're going to have agent provocateurs slip into town, start, ginning the rioting up, and we're going to try to have this spread across the country, so stay on course. Is this what he's trying to say? Now, we understand that the Ebola problem in West Africa is continuing. In some places, it's starting to slow, like in Liberia. They're seeing that the situation is getting a little bit better. Sierra Leone, really not so much. But it looks like a surgeon who contracted Ebola, who was flown here to Nebraska, has died. He was from Sierra Leone. But the United States right now, it looks like they're going to be pretty much screening those people coming from Mali right now because of what's happening. It seems like there's a couple cases reported in Mali all of a sudden, and we have to remember Mali is the third largest gold producer, and France invaded Mali as soon as Germany asked for their gold back. And we have to look at all these nations. We understand that natural resources, oil, were discovered in each one of these nations: Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Uganda, Nigeria, and we can see this is where Ebola has broken out, and we can see that United States, UK are bringing down military assets and pretty much garrison the countries right now. And I'm just curious to see if all troops will be removed once everything settles down. And in Liberia, it is starting to settle down, but it doesn't seem like the troops are going to be moving out or doing anything. They're there just for support. They're not going to interact with any type of patients or anything like that. They're going to be kept away from them, but they're there just to give the authorities of Liberia support, and we'll have to see how this plays out as time goes on. Now, we continually get reports that Russian planes are flying into the airspace of different countries. Like, Swedish military has confirmed that a Russian plane entered their airspace, and then all of a sudden they came out and they said, oh, wait a minute, it wasn't a Russian aircraft, it was a French aircraft. Now, of course, they're using this to continually make it seem like Russia is all over the place with their military aircraft. And again, they're mostly in international space. Yes, they fly very close to that area, but so does NATO, so does the United States, and so does most other countries, as we can see. The French embassy in Stockholm says they are currently investigating the air violation. They don't have any information right now. We are in contact with Paris, trying to understand why there was a plane in the Swedish airspace. But of course, they fully come right out and they say it is Russia when it is not Russia. And they're continually putting that out there. And of course, the corporate media just continually reports that it's Russia. Russia has a sub. Russia has a plane. And most of the time, it is not Russia whatsoever. Now, it looks like the North Korea leader Kim Jong-un's special envoy, a high-ranking member of the ruler's Workers' Party, has arrived on a 7-day visit to Russia. The North Korean envoy will discuss a traditional range of topics. A source in the Russian Foreign Ministry told the news agency the agenda has not been agreed in detail, but there is a traditional range of topics such as bilateral relations, international problems, and, of course, nuclear talks. And we can see right now, and we should expect that the United States should be pushing out some propaganda in the corporate media to demonize North Korea and Russia about this meeting, where they're getting ready to develop a ballistic missile. And we should see this very, very soon, because every time North Korea does something or has some type of deal with Russia or China, we see that type of propaganda emerge. Now, on Friday and Saturday, I talked about this satellite photo, which was produced by a Russian news agency, Channel 1, and they put it out there, and of course the independent media took it and they ran with it, and we didn't know if it was real or not, and it's starting to look like it is fake, and it seems like a third party gave it to Channel 1, and it looks like they were trying to set up Russia. Now, Russia did not produce this whatsoever. It was not from them. It was given to the Channel 1, and they were saying that, yes, this was a background checked photo, and they put it out there, and it looks like this was done right at the G20 meeting to pretty much show that Russia puts out fake propaganda, but this had nothing to do with Russia whatsoever, and it looks like this was a setup by the central bankers trying to show that Russia actually did shoot down MH17, because why else would they put out this fake information? But it looks like a lot of sites that are out there have really taken it and ripped it apart and found out where the coordinates are, and the plane path is completely wrong. The size of the planes are wrong. It looks like they took a photo of the Boeing from the Boeing site, and a lot of this information is coming out, and it looks like a lot of the cloud cover is not in the right position and matches cloud cover from a couple years ago. So it is fake and it is not real. I did an update on the Sentinel alerts back on Sunday, so we can see right now that this has been a propaganda trick to convince everyone that Russia was putting out propaganda, and they actually shot down MH17. Now, we understand that they did not shoot down MH17. Who was in the air traffic controller? Who was controlling that? It was Kiev, who had a fighter plane up in the air, and this is from satellite images. We know for a fact that there was a plane following the Malaysian flight, and they took them off course, set them at a certain altitude, and then all of a sudden it was shot down. And of course, Kiev has never produced any type of black boxes with the communication between the air traffic controllers, and the United States has no evidence whatsoever either way. They just came out right off the bat blaming Russia. Now, it looks like the Dutch investigators have begun evacuating debris of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 from the crash site in eastern Ukraine. Human rights activists are addressing the UN and OSCE, warning the investigation is being either delayed on purpose or suppressed. Now, we understand that Kiev was out there and they're continually shelling in that area, so a lot of the Dutch investigators and the Malaysian authorities were afraid to go in that area because of the firing. And right now, it looks like they'll be collecting all the debris, taking it back for analysis. Now, Russia is out there, and they're insisting that the United States provide satellite photographs made at the moment of the recent Malaysian Boeing 777 death for investigation. We keep insisting that the Americans provide their satellite data, as they couldn't but see what was happening on the day at that place, Kellen said. We also urged the need for talks between air traffic controllers that can be provided by the Ukrainian side. Now, they have gotten none of this. The United States has not produced any type of evidence whatsoever. The recordings have not been handed over, and this information is very vital. Now, of course, we understand the United States, Australia, Netherlands, Ukraine, Germany all have a pact where they're not going to release any information. They're going to keep it all private. If one country wants to release it and the other countries veto this, guess what? It stays secret. It sounds like pretty much everything the United States does with John Kennedy, with 9/11, with the bombing. Everything is always a secret, and it's for national security reasons, so we can't let this out. And again, it's the same pattern over and over and over. Now, where Russia is out there, and they are saying that NATO prefers not to mention Kiev's violations of the Minsk ceasefire agreement and instead whips up anti-Russian sentiment, a deputy official spokesman of the Russian Foreign Ministry said. Unfortunately, we see that the alliance is not seeking a constructive discussion of acute problems, instead preferring to feed the anti-Russian propaganda machine with the aim of justifying plans to reinforce defense potential of the bloc. And we can see right now, this is exactly what is going on. They do not want peace. They understand the economy is collapsing, and they need to move this forward. They need to get the war started, so they're going to provoke as much as they possibly can. Now, Kiev is out there, and they're saying there is absolutely no sense in holding another contact group meeting to sign the new Minsk agreements in Ukraine. There is absolutely no sense in holding another Minsk format meeting until these agreements are fulfilled, and this is coming from the Ukrainian side. They're saying that the southeastern people are not fulfilling the Minsk agreement, so why should we all get together? But again, it is Ukraine who's bringing up more and more military assets to the border of the southeastern section, and we see that things are in motion, because what's going to happen is they're going to push this as hard as they can, and they want the southeastern or Russia to make the first move, and if they don't, they will use a false flag and blame it on them so they can start the war. So basically, last week the government in Ukraine cut off pensions benefits, a little bit of provoking, to the residents of the rebel-held areas until such time as these areas return to Ukraine. Yesterday, President Poroshenko announced Ukraine rebel areas to lose state services. Ukraine's president has ordered the withdrawal of all state services, including funding for hospitals and schools from rebel-held areas. Mr. Poroshenko's ruling says all state companies and institutions should end their work in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions within a week. It also says Ukraine's central bank is to close down all banking services, including card operations, in some areas within a month. Kiev announced it can suspend Article 15 of the Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. Poroshenko has set a humanitarian trap, hoping Putin will invade. So we can see they are continually provoking, trying to get Putin to invade, and they just pretty much suspended Article 15 for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and they're doing everything they can to provoke. I mean, it's unbelievable. Now, from all of this, what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing the people in this area getting very, very nervous, and what are they doing? Well, we see bank runs. We see people lining up trying to get as much money as they possibly can from the ATMs, because they know things are going to get worse. They realize war is coming, and since Poroshenko is shutting down everything, all the banking services, the hospitals, the schools, all the services, everyone is trying to get their money out before any of this happens. Now, we understand Ukraine has made a deal with Russia. They paid a small portion of the tranche for natural gas. They also get coal from South Africa, and it looks like they're really not paying for the coal, and it seems like they're a little bit behind on their payments. So now it looks like they might be looking to America to supply the coal, because South Africa is saying, well, just a minute, you haven't paid us yet, so we're not going to supply more coal. Now, how is it going to work with America? Is the United States government going to give the government of Ukraine a loan and then have them take that loan and pay the companies here in America? So we can see that they're doing everything they possibly can to bypass what is going on. And it seems like Ukraine pretty much pays for nothing, because we understand they're in a huge amount of debt. They have no production going on. Their currency is collapsing. The entire economic situation there is collapsing, and there's no way out except for war for them. Now, it looks like the people in the Lugansk and Donetsk area, they're saying that we are open for all, not only for Russia. We are ready to work with Ukraine and anyone else or any other country that would like to work with us. And again, they want peace. They want a meeting for the Minsk deal. They're trying to settle this, but again, the central bankers, the puppet regime inside Ukraine, they don't want peace. They want war, and we can see they're doing everything they possibly can. Now, Poroshenko is out there. He is saying we are prepared for a scenario of total war. We don't want war. We want peace. And we are fighting for European values, but Russia does not respect any agreement, so we're ready for all-out war. So basically what they're saying is they're getting ready for war. We will blame it on the southeastern section and Russia once the time comes. Obama was out there on Sunday saying that Russia would remain isolated by the international community if Mr. Putin failed to end Russian backing for the separatist rebels in Ukraine. And we can see right now that this is all about provoking. They are back on track. They took that break. They used that ceasefire deal to replenish the military assets, to train their soldiers, and now they're using the propaganda, demonizing Russia, and they're pushing this forward really hard. Now, out in the Middle East, we understand things are completely falling apart. We understand that it's getting harder and harder to keep these countries with the puppet regime inside each one of these countries, and all these countries are starting to fall, and they realize this, and they realize they need to bring in troops. They need to put boots on the ground. So they're coming out with a lot of propaganda right now. The Islamic State militants have an army of about 200,000 now, over 6 times larger than the previous CIA estimates. Now again, you have to remember how they use the Islamic State. The Islamic State is a force that the United States put together. They brought them into Iraq to cause chaos, and of course we're seeing them show up in different countries to make it look like this is where the United States has to go into, because terrorism is moving forward into all these countries. But again, this is a small group. What they're really talking about is the people of these countries where they're rising up. More and more people are joining the revolution to throw out the puppet regimes, and this is why their estimates are changing, because now there are more and more people fighting, saying we want our country back. Look at Libya, look at Yemen, look at Iraq, look at Lebanon. It is growing, and they realize this, and eventually they're using this to say, listen, the Islamic State is growing. We need to put boots on the ground. Now, of course, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is out there, and he's saying we will accelerate their mission to train Iraqi forces to combat the Islamic State militants, using troops already in Iraq to start the effort. And again, they're going to come out and say this wasn't enough. They don't have enough troops. They're not getting trained well enough, and you're going to see this completely change right now. Now, Obama was out there, and he wants to make this perfectly clear to everybody, that he will not work with Assad. U.S. President Barack Obama on Sunday rejected any alliance with Assad, arguing that the Syrian ruler was illegitimate and that any such pact would backfire. For us to then make common cause with him against the Islamic State would only turn more Sunnis in Syria in the direction of supporting the Islamic State and would weaken our coalition. Obama said the communication with the Assad regime was limiting to informing them that the U.S. uses Syrian airspace in the anti-Islamic operations. They would be well advised not to take us on. But beyond that, there is no expectation that we are going to, in some ways, enter an alliance with Assad. The president said he is not credible in that country, and we do not recognize him whatsoever. Now, we have to understand all the countries they're going to go back, or all the countries they're going to invade, are the ones they don't want to have in the coalition, and that would be Iran and Syria. They don't want a coalition with Russia. They don't want one with China, because they are going to be the enemies. And we can see right now this is building. The propaganda is continually building. Now, We can see right now they're making the case of why they would put boots on the ground inside of Iraq. During a press conference in Australia during the G20 Leadership Summit, Obama speculated that he might use ground troops in certain situations. Wow, he went from absolutely no boots on the ground that he might use ground troops in certain situations. Obama explained that the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Martin Dempsey had a responsibility to be ready for scenarios that might require ground troops. One such scenario would be a nuclear weapon in the hands of the Islamic State. Now, what are the chances of them getting one of those, or being reported that they have one of those? If we discovered the Islamic State had gotten possession of a nuclear weapon, and we had to run an operation to get it out of their hands, then yes, we will put boots on the ground. If they have chemical weapons and they're actually using them, we would put boots on the ground. If they have other technologies that they got, we would put boots on the ground. If they had an air force, we would put boots on the ground. If they, pretty much what he's saying, we're going to put boots on the ground because we're going to tell everyone that they have a nuclear weapon, that they have sarin gas, that they have more tanks, that they have other types of weapons. They're going to continually use this because this is going to be their way of getting more troops in there, and we know for a fact they've been setting this up, and we can see right now the division headquarters is already set up, the air base is ready to go, and we know for a fact they are getting ready to bring in more troops. Now, as we know, the United States government central bankers will eventually need to get into Pakistan. They're using drone strikes there. But we're already seeing that a splinter group of Pakistan's Taliban has pledged support to the Islamic State. Now we have Al-Qaeda with the Islamic State. We have the Khorasan group. We have Boko Haram with the Islamic State. Basically, it is all the Islamic State, and that is the terrorist group at this point. Now, the United States has approved additional military sales to Iraq. Despite devastating failures by the Iraq military, they're going to be sending about $700 million, which would include air weapons as well as spare parts for artillery and trucks. And there is reports coming out of Iraq from Iraqi forces, from the foreign news press. Iraqi forces have found out that the U.S. aircraft usually airdrop arms of food cargoes for the Islamic militants who collect them on the ground. Asia news agencies quoted Iraqi's army's intelligence officers as saying, on Saturday, Iraqi security sources disclosed that the Islamic terrorist group is using the state-of-the-art weapons which are only manufactured by the U.S. and each of their bullets are worth thousands of dollars. What is important is that the U.S. sends these weapons to only those that cooperate with the Pentagon, and this indicates that the U.S. plays a role in arming the Islamic State, an Iraqi security source told FNA. The source noted that the most important advantage of the U.S.-made weapons used by the Islamic State is that these bullets pierced armored vehicles and kill the people inside the vehicle. So we're having more and more reports that things that are being dropped out of planes are definitely going to the Islamic State, and they're done on purpose. And we can see that, yes, they are supplying everything they need because this is the proxy army of the United States central bankers, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations. Now, it looks like the State Department was cyber attacked. The U.S. State Department has shut down the whole of its unclassified email system after fears of a hacker managed to obtain access. An official said none of the department's classified systems were affected, but just enough to hit the unclassified to make it look like another group was trying to hack into the government. Now, of course, there have speculation out there that it could have been China or Russia, but they have no proof out there. But they like to throw that out there so people in their minds think, yes, it is Russia and China, and this is in preparation for the cyber attack that is coming, so everyone realizes that it is coming from China or Russia. Now, it looks like there was a new beheading. There was a new video, and of course, this is another fake that's put out there. It's more propaganda, and we're also getting reports that Jihadi John, the guy that they don't know who it is, he's masked. They have no clue who he is, but they're getting reports that he's injured. It makes no sense whatsoever. It really seems like it's some type of show. and they're just putting out propaganda to convince us that they have this information, but they don't know who he is, but they're telling us that he's injured. It makes no sense whatsoever. Now, in the video where the beheading was being done, the British accented narrator pretty much goaded President Obama to send in U.S. ground forces if he wanted to try to stop the Islamic State. Now, again, why would they tell the United States and the coalition to bring in ground troops to try to stop them? Does that make any sense whatsoever? Look what's really happening in Libya. Look what's happening in Yemen. Look what's happening in Lebanon. You see the actual people there trying to take back their country. They're not calling out to all the other countries saying, listen, come on in and attack us because we want to take you on too. The Islamic State is trying to create a caliphate. Why would they be so vocal to have all these nations come in and fight them while they do this? It makes no sense whatsoever. This is all propaganda to make people believe that, yeah, they want the Islamic State, they want the United States to come in and attack the Islamic State. It's just unbelievable the way they're playing this out. It makes no sense whatsoever. Now, also in this video, they said they're going to bring the slaughter onto the streets of the West, and this is in preparation for a major attack in the United States, UK, and Europe. And right now, the United States needs to remain vigilant. This is coming from Jay Johnson, because the lone wolf acts of terror, he says, they are spreading. It is getting worse, and he's very worried right now because what's been happening is that these new lone wolf attackers, they don't have to be a part of the Islamic State. They could just be looking online at the internet, at social media, and they could be convinced to pretty much go out and cause terror here in the United States. And this is why he has local law enforcement and other places looking at everyone and spying on everyone to make sure that, these people aren't there. They're also using their own type of social media and websites where they have think again, turn away, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you're trying to tell me someone who's looking at the Islamic State online who wants to kill is going to look at their website? This is all for propaganda to convince everyone that this is real, that yes, people are joining up, people are out there fighting, and people by the masses are going out to the Islamic State who want to join up. But again, they don't know who they are, but they have the perfect count of tens of thousands that are joining and going over there, but they just don't know who they are, but they have the count. It makes no sense whatsoever. Of course, what this is all for is to convince everyone that the attacks will be coming from the inside, and this is how it's going to be done. They're prepping everyone for the false flag event. This is exactly what's going on, and everyone needs to be prepared for what is going to happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.